Namaste everyone, I'm your co-host Shawnee ma'am. Welcome to your favorite learning channel. The topic for today's video is differences between unicellular and multicellular organisms. So let's understand what are the differences between these two types of organisms. So first characteristic that we would consider here is the number of cells present in these organisms. Number of cells. So unicellular organisms are those organisms which are composed of only a single cell. Okay, so unicellular organisms, we can define unicellular organisms as those organisms that are composed of only a single cell, and hence we also call these organisms as single celled organisms. Okay, now let's see what are multicellular organisms and how many cells do they have. So multicellular organisms are composed of more than they are composed of more than one cell, that is they have multiple cells. So multicellular organisms are those organisms that are composed of more than one cell. Okay, so next characteristic that we would consider is their body organization. Okay, so in unicellular organisms, the body organization is simple, whereas in case of multicellular organisms, the body organization is quite complex. Okay, and the next characteristic based on which we would differentiate is the life processes and how they are performed. So in case of unicellular organisms, here the single cell carries out all the life processes, all the processes of life. Okay, now in case of multicellular organisms, there are multiple cells. Multiple cells are present that perform these multiple cells perform different functions. Okay, then the next characteristic would be the organisms included. So in unicellular organisms, both the prokaryotes and eukaryotes can be included. For example, prokaryotes could be bacteria and eukaryotic unicellular organism could be yeast. Okay, whereas in case of multicellular organisms, only eukaryotes are included here. Okay, then the next characteristic is lifespan. So unicellular organisms usually have a shorter lifespan. So the lifespan is usually short in case of unicellular organisms, whereas it is comparatively longer. That is, the lifespan is comparatively longer in case of multicellular organisms. Okay, then The next parameter or characteristic would be the cell differentiation. Okay, so in unicellular organisms the cell differentiation is absent, whereas in case of multicellular organisms the cell differentiation is present. Okay, then after cell differentiation we would consider the exposure, the cell exposure to the environment. Okay, so in case of unicellular organisms what happens, total cell body, the total cell body is exposed to the environment, whereas in case of multicellular organisms only the outer cells, only the outer cells are exposed, only the outer cells are exposed to the environment. Now let's see a few examples. Okay, so examples of unicellular organisms could be bacteria, amoeba, then yeast. Okay, yeast, etc. Okay, and the examples of multicellular organisms could be human beings, plants, animals, okay, etc. So now let's quickly revise what we have studied today. Okay, so today we have differentiated between unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. So the first characteristic we considered was the number of cells that were present in these organisms. So unicellular organisms are those organisms that are composed of only a single cell, whereas multicellular organisms are those organisms that are composed of more than one cell. Then we considered body organization and saw that unicellular organisms have simple organization of body, whereas multicellular organisms have a complex organization of their body. Then we saw how life processes are performed in these organisms. So in unicellular organisms a single cell carries out all the processes of life, whereas in multicellular organisms there are multiple cells that perform different functions. Okay, so then we talked about the organisms that are included in these categories. So in case of unicellular organisms both prokaryotes as well as eukaryotes are included, whereas in case of multicellular organisms only eukaryotes can be included. Then if we talk about lifespan, usually it is shorter in case of unicellular organisms and comparatively the lifespan is longer in case of multicellular organisms. Then we saw the type of cell differentiation. So cell differentiation was absent in case of unicellular organisms and cell differentiation is present in case of multicellular organisms. Then we saw the cell exposure to the environment, and in unicellular organisms what happened, the total cell, as they have only a single cell, hence the total cell body is exposed to the environment, whereas in case of multicellular organisms only the outer cells are exposed to the environment. Then we talked about a few examples. So in case of unicellular organisms, bacteria, amoeba, yeast are the examples of unicellular organisms, and the examples of multicellular organisms can be human beings, plants, animals, etc. Here we can see a few pictures. That is, this is bacterial cell and it is a unicellular organism because bacteria is a unicellular organism. It is composed of only a single cell. So these plant cell and animal cell, so these cells are the types types of cells that can be found in multicellular organisms. That is, multicellular organisms like plants and animals have cells, that is, they have plant cell and animal cell respectively. Thus, these cells can be found in multicellular organisms. Okay, so I hope you all would have got some great insights by watching today's video. Please do not forget to like and share the video. Till then, thank you for watching.